Rosemarie, it's so good to have you back. And
Great to
we will continue with, I actually wanted to go over a little bit of what we went over in our podcast too, in regards to when you're searching for a house. A lot of times we have this great big internet that is open to us. And a lot of times we go look at Zillow or Redfin or Trulia, and we go, oh, this is a really cool house. I really like this house. And we're looking at pictures, and there's a big caveat to that. You want to talk about that?
Yeah. What I like to remind people is pretty much anything you find on the internet is advertising. So, yeah, you might get some really good information. And yes, you can learn so much. And, when you do your search as well, um, you can you can listen to lectures from experts on all kinds of subjects. And, you can look people up to find out if they are, in fact, experts.
Hmm.
When it comes to buying a house and looking at a house, and when you're on Zillow or Trulia or any of them, those are not updated. What you're going to see is, you'll pick 6 houses and maybe one of them will be available because they're up there for advertising purposes to draw people. So what ends up happening? You go to one of those places and it's nothing but ads. There's always an agent listed. Click here. Sometimes it's a listing agent. Sometimes most of the time it's not. So you go, oh, call this agent. Okay. Well, that agent paid for the advertising. It's an advertising. So you're not necessarily getting to the listing agent. You're just getting to an agent. And those houses, a lot of houses go fast, especially in this market. So
Yes.
when you're working with a realtor, I mean, they have rules, and I don't, I don't want to pretend like I know real estate law. I mean, that's not my expertise. But they have rules about how long you can have a purchase agreement that you're looking at before you show it to, and they have rules about that, and they have rules about how long, it takes to get it in the market, show it up as sold or pending, um, so that other people don't, want to look at it. But if you're looking at one of those other sites, they might not be updated.
Right.
They a lot of times they're going to have the list price, and the list price isn't always the same as what you're going to buy it for, and you don't necessarily know what it sold for. So a lot of people, I mean, beforehand, before you've actually started your search, I think that's a great tool because you can find out the idea of the houses, the prices of the houses being listed, and you can look up the taxes, or a lot of times the taxes are there. They're not always 100% accurate, but they're
Right.
listed and they give you an idea of what the insurance is going to be. And if there's a homeowners association, they list that. So it's a great idea to get a feel
Hmm.
out there.
That's
But
that generalized, and it's important to recognize that that is a generalized, looking at location, looking at different things. Oh, this looks like a really good place, looks like a really good location. But when you're looking for the specifics, now that we're talking about searching for a house and you're looking for the specifics, you know, Redfin might have a house on there that you think, oh, this is great, but that listing might be 3 years old. That, my
yeah.
house was listed on Redfin, and we had lived in it for 3 years.
Wow.
And it was like,
So,
I don't think
so
that's right.
inactive. Yeah.
But
Well, yeah,
again, what you said, it does have like an agent's name that you can contact. Sometimes there's a mortgage calculator, which, we all know is not accurate.
because it's
So
based on whatever rate they put it in, right?
yeah, exactly. So all of that. So there's the caveat to that. And I think that's one reason why having a buying agent, is so important. Yeah, because they can go to those MLS, the multiple listing service, and that is up to date.
When
Yeah.
I bought my house, it was about a quarter of a century ago. I had planned on staying in it for 3 years. Oh well. But even though I was an experienced loan officer at the time, I was still a first-time home buyer.
Mm-hmm.
I would be running around the neighborhood, driving around the neighborhood, taking down addresses, and I'd send it to my realtor. And I'm like, what about this house? And he was really trying not to get frustrated with me because he said, okay, the reason that one didn't show up was because it's $30,000 more than you want to spend.
Mm-hmm.
That's good reason. That's good reason. So even though it's kind of natural to want to keep looking and stop by every house you drive past, that's got a sign on it,
Mm-hmm.
um, that's not the most efficient way to do it because they might not be on the market. They might not have, all the things that you want. You see this house and you're, well, yeah, maybe why didn't this one show up? Well, you said you needed a basement, and this one doesn't have a basement, which is also very important when you're searching, when you're picking your search parameters. Don't pick them too tight. A
Right.
lot of people, they say, I want this, and then they end up getting something different.
Right.
But, and when your things change, and you're like, what? I think I do want a such and such, or no, we need this. Can you change our search parameters?
Exactly. And it's good to be flexible on that. One of the things that we talked about in looking at a neighborhood was looking at the crime. And one of the things that I learned kind of the hard way was yeah, that there are about 8 things that you really need to know about the house that you're getting. And some of those you can get through looking them up online. Some of them you actually have to go in, like to your police department, to the police records, and see, based on that address, how many calls were made to that address, how many incidents reports. And this is something that I never thought about doing. But we moved into a house, and within a week of being in that house, the police were at our door. And come to find out,
With a bread basket, a welcome to the neighborhood.
nope, with their hands on their guns, and I actually walked out on my porch because I seen that it was escalating rather than de-escalating with the police officers when the second officer went for his gun. And that was a very eye-opening experience.
Young man, you put that thing back in your holster.
Yeah, I come out and it was like I de-escalated the situation. But
Little
it,
lady here, little lady here.
it was the fact that number one, there had been a number of incident reports on this house in the last 4 years prior to our buying it. It had been empty for 8 months prior to our buying it. But for the last 4 years, there had been domestic violence reports. So when the police officers came, they came thinking that they were going to have to use force if the person got belligerent. Well, the incident that they came for was we were unpacking our car, and we had 3 vehicles that we had pulled in, one to the driveway, and we pulled one onto the grass, and the other one was sitting at the front on the curb. And a neighbor had called the police and said that we were um, abusing the privileges. You're not allowed to park your car in the grass in a certain city. And we were unloading our car, and my husband was tired. We were unloading, a whole house full of furniture. And here these 2 police officers show up, and they show up in force with a attitude of, we understand that you are abusing your privileges We've been
You're
here a
parking on
week.
your grass.
We've been here a week, and you're not supposed to park on your grass. This is not, any, my husband's like, what are we talking about here? But
The
he's
gun in the holster, young
yeah,
man.
he's six
It's
foot two,
parking on the
250 pounds. This police officer is probably 5'8", 5'9", and he's feeling threatened. So, there's so many things that you need to be aware of. But so anyway, there's 8 things about your house that you really should look at. And that is the history of the construction. A
Mm.
lot of houses started off as a 2-room house and expanded, you want to look at the details of the previous sales. Was it a foreclosure? Was it a rental? You want to know who's associated with that address. That's a big one, because you will find, even if there's identity theft, that, that'll show up being associated with an address. And that can affect your credit in future years. You want to know the environmental information on that property, because a lot of times they take an old junkyard, an old waste deposit, and all of a sudden create a new construction site, you know? Um, did any deaths occur on that property? And, sometimes they're crimes, like a murder or different things like that. And you don't necessarily want to go, oh yeah, we've got, some good juju here. I mean, seriously.
Yeah,
Um,
we're getting into a little area outside my expertise. Energy can be important. Yeah.
yeah, I think so, and but I mean, it's always good to know. What was this a home that was lived in and loved?
Drug house.
Was it a drug house? We had that, the meth activity. Was there, I mean, because that stuff permeates the wall, and while, the what is it? It's that special paint that kills the smell. It can kill it for a little while, but that smell from meth activity seeps through that, and it actually causes health issues. So if you don't know about this stuff, you know, and the last one is fire or gas leaks, especially with underground, you know, um, piping. You never know. Was there a fire or a gas leak on this property? So those are the 8 things that I thought would be really important to know. Especially the one with the incident reports. You want to know, are there any things that we're going to need to know about?
If there's a lot of incident reports, maybe you want to post a sign in your front. Dear law enforcement, new owners.
Right, right, right. And I think you touched on this before, when you're driving around the neighborhood and you have the client that goes and he checks out the neighborhood at night. Talk with the neighbors. Big thing, if you want to get a feel for the neighborhood, you want to talk with your neighbors. And if you don't, if you're a real outgoing person, and you're probably not going to have a problem. But if you're kind of a quiet person and keep to yourself, sometimes those neighbors are like, who is that person that just moved in? And why are they keeping to themselves? And I mean, it kind of sparks this mysterious aura about you. And that can be something that flares up their own insecurities.
I have a funny story about me moving into my house. We had a truck. We rented a truck, and we asked a friend to help, a guy friend to help, and then the truck didn't work. It wouldn't start. So then we got the truck started, and we drove it over to my new house, which was a half mile from my old house. And we pulled into the neighbor across the street so we could back in to our driveway. It was a straight shot. And then the truck stalled.
Oh no.
And it was nighttime. And it was dark. It was winter. And we, silly me, I jumped out of the truck. Let me see if I can push it. I couldn't push it. So I go to my neighbor, knocking on the door. Was no answer. I went out and got a piece of paper. Hi, neighbor. You might have noticed the truck in his driveway. Sorry about that. It stalled. We'll have it out in the morning. I thought that was pretty funny way to meet my cross the street neighbors.
Absolutely, absolutely. And it could have been one of those things if, you hadn't have done that, they would have been, like, calling the police going, "Okay, there's this truck in my," and
I'm so sorry.
one of the things that we've learned since we moved to Texas is that, there's different crime sprees in different cities.
Sure.
And here it's, let's check the handle on your car and see if you left, anything in here, and sometimes, just fiddling with the handle on some of the older cars especially, they can just open up the car and, oh, you left something in there, money, identity, anything like that, it's gone.
Yeah.
Identity theft is a huge thing that people can get from your car, because they'll take your insurance paper.
Yeah.
Didn't even know, I didn't think of that, but those are some of the things. So when you're looking at a neighborhood, you really want to look at that neighborhood. Is it a good neighborhood at night as well as during the day? Um, because you don't want to end up in a neighborhood that you're not happy with.
All right. That's an expensive mistake. Yeah.
Yeah, a very, very expensive mistake. One of the things you were talking about on the needs and the wants is, you know, um, one of the things that especially now we're looking at utility costs and things like that. So you want to know what utility costs are going to be. The different types of heat can make a difference in your utility bill. Like an electric baseboard heat or even radiant heat makes a difference. So, different kinds of heating, whether or not you're going to have central or local air conditioning, depending on where you live. Without central air conditioning here in Texas, I think I would have just melted away. Um, you know, and you talked about the basement, and back in time when we were growing up, you could modify your basement and it wasn't a problem. In some cities now, you're not allowed to modify your basement is not allowed to be a bedroom or a living space unless you have an egress.
Oh, really? Even a living space. I've heard of the
Yeah,
bedroom before. I have a room that has a closet in the basement. We use it as an exercise room,
yeah,
but because
yeah,
it's not, I mean, it looks like a bedroom, but it's an exercise. Literally, we have exercise equipment in it. But yeah, I mean, I guess that would be important. I never heard of not being able to use a basement for living space. We got a
yeah.
family.
Yeah,
Basement.
in fact, several cities there in Michigan where they have now you made it a law that you cannot use a bedroom for or a basement for living space. It is for storage only. Utility,
Really?
yeah, like
I haven't
laundry
heard that one.
storage or
I
only.
That would be a problem for me because you know what? Personally, and I'm in good health and I run up and down the stairs probably 20 times a day and one at a time usually, but it's good exercise and it keeps me going and it gives me a reason to get up from the desk and but that you can spend less money on the same amount of living space when you put it in the basement. I
Right.
mean, that's one of my choices, as opposed to having a bigger ranch or building up. It's less expensive, because the houses are less expensive.
It's compact too, so your heating, isn't as expensive as well. Yeah, one way to look at that is okay, in this city, I need to know what the laws are in regards to, the use of a basement, and how can I change this? Sometimes it's putting an ingress egress, you know? So,
And those don't have to be expensive. You can get those in a window.
exactly, and sometimes the window has to be a specific size.
Oh, sure, yeah.
Here in Texas, where I'm at, um, every bedroom has to have an egress.
Oh,
So every room that you use as a bedroom has to have uh, access where you can move out the window and you can get out. So, or has access to an outside door. So that's an interesting thing because you can't have internal bedrooms here.
mm,
You
yeah.
can only have external bedrooms. So it's important to know that about your future house too, is, what am I going to be able to do with this? And one of the things you talked about too was the lawn. And I know for us, um, we lived on a like a half acre, and taking care of that lawn, it would take my husband 2 to 3 days with the self-propelling lawnmower, and, he'd often be like, "I really do need a riding lawnmower," but, um, then he would say, "Nah, I like the exercise," like you do running up and down the stairs. But if you don't wanna do a half acre of gardening, or, lawn mowing or weeding or whatever, that's probably not the place for you, you know? So, one of the other things is, the basic stuff, like looking at how old the roof is, how old the water heater is, how old, your furnace is, when was it last updated, and, what appliances are going to remain in that house, because those are things you're going to have to think about, as far as, am I going to have to put, like, this water heater's 30 years old. What's the lifespan of a water heater? Oh, 10 to 20 years.
Yeah, I was
Maybe
gonna
10 to
say,
15
yeah.
actually. And this one's twice the age. Well, that's probably something I'm going to need to budget for. And so, knowing that in advance of, making the offer, I think is extremely important.
Those are the things you wanna look at while you're searching, while you're looking through the houses, exactly.
Yeah, so what appliances are coming with the house? What appliances am I going to need to replace? Because if you're leaving your washer and dryer because, it's not going with you, you have to replace the washer and dryer. That's an expense that you're going to not want to say, oh, well, after we live there a year, we'll buy a washer and dryer. You're not going to want to do that.
I
So
think we can have a whole show about what to do when you're making an offer and actually looking at the houses, yeah.
I think that would
Next
be
week.
next week. Yeah, that's it. So I wanted to touch about, you talked about prioritizing, and I wanted to touch on something that, um we all have different ideas of money, and we all have different core values about, what is most important to us. And I think it's really important when you're looking for a house, because you've got emotional ties. You've got emotional ties to your money, and you've got those core values. And if you're not considering your core values and what is really important to you, then you're going to not be happy. Doesn't matter how much house you have, or if it's the perfect place, if it doesn't meet your core values. And so, like, core values, I want to be able to spend time with my family. But because I'm in this house and I'm working 30 minutes away, I find myself spending more time on the road than I have time to spend with my family. So, aligning your core values, that's that prioritization that you were talking about. Aligning those core values is so very, very important to making your home be the place that you really want it to be.
When you're saying that, I'm thinking about the COVID times and, the lockdowns,
Mm,
and, my husband and I were in our family room that we had built in the basement. And we had a fireplace with a big TV, nice, nice, nice. I looked over at him one time and I said, I'm really glad that number one, we're married, I've got companionship, but number two, the house. I am so glad we did what we did to our house. Because yeah, well, I mean, I'm in my house a lot anyway, but I was in my house more, and so was my husband. And I was so glad that it had all of the things that I needed. Man, I got a jacuzzi hot tub. I've got, nice big family room, the little backyard where, could do some weeding. And so that, I mean, I guess what if you locked in it for a while? Is it going to be meeting your needs? So that might be.
Exactly, exactly. That's a really good thing. I mean, we learned a lot from COVID just on the isolation.
We sure did.
We'll pass by that one. But I mean, it's important to be in a house where you are comfortable, where your needs are being met. If you know if you've got 4 kids and you're on lockdown and there is only, a one room and one TV, nobody's going to be happy, because there's not enough space. There's not enough ability to function. But, I like to think about the priority and the core values as like building blocks, because what is this house going to represent to you? And most times, for me, the house represented a security or surety that this my kids were going to be able to grow up in a place that they could run, they could play. um there was a surety there, a certainty. And then there's also, you want to be able to like have create memories with your family, with your friends. I remember one time my uncle called and he said, "Well, we just can meet at a park." And I said, "Well, we just can meet at my house. We lived on a half acre. We can
I
just
got park
go to
facilities in my
and
backyard.
exactly." And he came and he said, "Well, we didn't need a park. We just needed Mary Lou." You know, so the fact was is that I already had the ability. So creating that memory, and it was that was something that was one of my core values. I wanted to be able to create memories in this house and to be able to build that. And sometimes that's a little bit of uncertainty just to give it a variety, and you just want that variety sometimes, you don't want it the same old, same old. You like to have the ability to create memories and do different things, and you want to be able to utilize your money in a way that you have the ability to create the memories. Another one is some people look at this a little more, but there's a cultural factor as well. And sometimes being in control of what's going on around you, and or having significance. Oh, I live in the house right over there, you see it from the road. There's that significance. Or you know not trying to be better than the Joneses, trying to be equal to the Joneses sometimes is a core value for some people. That's not usually one for me. But I mean, at the same time, it is a core value. Oh my goodness, we're running out of time again. That means we have 10 minutes left. Okay. So we actually almost get through this. But I wanted to go through the other three. And
Well, you know what? Yeah, well, I think we could do a whole show on some of this stuff, the
yeah,
shelves and stuff. I
yeah.
think we can do that next time. Why don't we um let's talk about that NAR legislation.
Yes, let's do that.
That'll probably now I'm not an expert at the legislation. I have not done a deep dive on it, but
Mhm.
I have reviewed a lot of comments in all my real estate agent groups on Facebook. and there's a lot of confusion going on.
Yeah, so let's stop for a moment. Would you please say what NAR represents?
National Association of Realtors.
Okay. So this litigation is regarding the National Association of Realtors.
And I, like I said, I don't know all the details. What I'm picking up from is just listening to the realtors talk about it. And from what I can gather, um, the lawsuit, if I'm, and don't quote me on all this, but from what I can gather, the lawsuit now forbids anybody from advertising buyer's agent's commission on the multi-listing service.
Hmm.
So traditionally, well, a long time ago, even before I got into this business, it was mostly you would buy the house from the listing agent or the office that the listing agent worked for. And and we were talking a little bit last time about agencies, you know, a lot of them were dual agencies, or sometimes it was just a listing agent. And listing agent would make arrangements for if I get the buyer, okay, instead of 6%, you know, commission, you'll only have to pay me 5 or 4 or whatever. And they wouldn't really represent the buyers, but they would do the paperwork and explain the documents. So I mean, that's one of the things that you can do is you look into anyway, so now these are changing.
Right.
Now that was, you know, then we got into a big push when I was in the business, started in the business for buyer's agents. And that really makes sense to me, because if a real estate agent is working with a buyer, I mean, they're a customer, and if, you know, they want to do what's right for the customer.
Yeah, and sometimes there was that conflict too between the real estate agent as the selling agent and representing kind of in some way a buyer.
Well, I would say there's no conflict because it's clear that the listing agent represents the seller.
Right.
So if the buyer was looking through the house with the listing agent and his wife's like, oh my God, this house is to die for. I don't care what we have to pay. We need this house. Don't say it in front of the listing
Right,
agent,
right. Because
because
that
that's
person,
going directly to the
right,
seller.
because there's no negotiation, which is the big thing between a buying agent and a selling agent that you really want. You want that ability to negotiate.
You can still negotiate if you don't have an agent, but you're the one negotiating.
Right. And that's what I'm saying. Most people do not negotiate for themselves well.
I go to the store, I pay whatever's on the price tag.
Absolutely. And so, and one of the things that I understood about this lawsuit, they haven't settled it yet. They're still in the proposal state. Is that is would limit the buying agent from offering us a house that is more expensive, just to get a higher commission, and it would also um moderate the brokers commission, because a lot of the real estate agents have to pay a brokerage fee, and those brokerage fees often are extravagant. And I know a lot of real estate agents change brokerage because of those fees.
Well, my understanding is not exactly the same as you. I didn't know that they were, I don't know anything about, you know, the, how it affects the brokers. I do know that you're right. Brokers charge different things. Some people have office fees, some people have, you know, desk fees, some people, you know, whatever. They have a lot of different splits. They used to split and then you get to 100%. They have a lot of different kind of payment plans.
Hmm.
But so I don't know how that legislation, but my understanding is simply that they can't advertise, which makes it more difficult because it's always been an option that the seller doesn't have to pay the buyer's agent fee. And some of the buyer's agents or the sellers are like, well, why would I pay somebody else to negotiate against me? And I think of it like this. You go to a car dealer and you pay for the product. Who pays for the salesman? It's from the dealership. The dealership
Mhm,
pays for the salesman.
mhm.
So when you're asking a buyer to pay for the product and for somebody to sell it, that's kind of double dipping in my opinion, and that's just my opinion.
Yeah.
Which
I
may not be anybody else's opinion,
yeah.
right?
I think it's important to kind of go back to, what this might be, and I'm just gonna read from news in a commentator, Rob Weil. He just said, if the settlement is approved, brokerage commissions would be stripped from the MLS sites and opened up to negotiation with sellers. Among a series of other changes, home buyers too would be able to negotiate fees more easily if they choose to sign up with a broker. Though experts say the new arrangements may incentivize more buyers to forego brokers entirely.
A lot of buyers can't afford it, and
Right.
nor do they want to. And as a buyer, let's say I can afford $10,000 in commissions or
Hmm.
whatever, 9,000, 10,000 in commission, then I'm going to offer less for the house
Right.
than if I were, because I'm paying part of what I would consider the seller's cost.
Hmm.
I mean, it used to be you I think it's going to reduce the pool of buyers
Right.
because a lot of people don't have the money up front.
Hmm.
They're talking about doing sellers concessions, but maybe some buyers need those sellers concessions to pay the costs.
Absolutely.
And depending on the size of the sale of the house, the percentage of the sale might not cover as much as you think it would on a bigger house.
Right.
So, bottom line, they're promoting it as this, it's going to reduce costs.
Right. But
Um,
again, we talked about that with the mortgages that they were promoting,
yeah,
back, yeah, exactly. So I think there's a big caveat here, and that you always have to know what, what you're getting into. If you don't, that's when, you end up falling into a hole that sometimes you can't get out of. We are out of time. So I want to pick up again next week where we started off, because we still want to talk about having the pre-approval letter in hand and the offering on the house that we find that works with our core values. And Rosemarie, it's been wonderful to have you with me. We go and then we run out of time all the time. So you take care, and I will see you next week.
have a good one.
Okay.